The reading broken up in two parts, a verse of How Great Thou Art. If you don't know the verses by heart, you might want to open to that hymn now so that you are ready. Hymn 625. The epistle to the Romans, written by the Apostle Paul, was written to a church he had not yet visited, but longed to know. And it is, if you read it, quite a long and lengthy letter where he is working out, you can hear him working out the so what. What does this Jesus story mean? And putting it to paper or papyrus and sharing it with a church that is just beginning. So from Romans chapter 1, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and wickedness of those who by their wickedness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. Ever since the creation of the world, God's eternal power and divine nature, invisible though they are, have been understood and seen through the things God has made. Without excuse. For they knew God, but they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him. But they became futile in their thinking, and senseless minds were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools. And they exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images representing mortal human beings, or birds, or four-footed animals, or reptiles. And so our second reading is a continuation of our exploring the book of Acts. Paul finds himself in Athens at the Areopagus, and there he is sharing the story of Christ as gently as Paul knows how to share, which isn't often gentle, but there you are. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was deeply distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he argued in the synagogue with the Jews and the devout persons, and also in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be there. So also some Epicurean and Stoic philosophers debated with him. Some said, "What does this babbler want to say?" And others said he seems to be a proclaimer of foreign divinities. This was because he was telling the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. So they took him and brought him to the Areopagus and asked him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? It sounds rather strange to us, so we would like to know what it means." Now all the Athenians and the foreigners living there would spend their time in nothing but telling or hearing something new. And so Paul stood in front of them and said, "Athenians, I see how extremely religious you are in every way. For as I went through the city and looked carefully at the objects of your worship, I found among them an altar with the inscription to an unknown God. What therefore you worship as unknown, I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it, he who is Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in shrines made by human hands, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mortals life and breath and all things. From one ancestor, he made all nations to inhabit the whole world, and he allotted the times of their existence and the boundaries of the places where they would live, so that they would search for God, and perhaps grope for God, and find God, though indeed God is not far from each of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as even some of your own poets have said, for we too are his offspring. Since we are God's offspring, We ought not to think that the deity is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the art and imagination of mortals. While God has overlooked the times of human ignorance, now God commands all people everywhere to repent. Because he's fixed a day on which he will have the world judged in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed. And of this he has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead. And when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some scoffed. But others said, "We will hear you again about this." And at that point, Paul left. But some of them joined him and became believers, including Dionysius and a woman named Damaris and others with them. Hear what the Spirit is saying to us. So I am still kind of in the throes, maybe with you, with the good people of Hopewell, and the larger world around us, in those 10 days that those astronauts were in that tiny capsule, moving further out into the vastness of space than any of us have ever been. Seeing for the first time the dark side of the moon, and sharing with all of us those amazing images. What a relief from the vitriol and the violence of our daily headlines. For those who weren't having their homes bombed, who weren't in the midst of their wars close at hand, who weren't starving and struggling for daily existence, for those of us who had the ability to set aside those things, we could get lost in the wonder of what those 4 astronauts were showing us. Wasn't it amazing? The pictures, I went back yesterday and I looked again at the pictures, and I can't stop looking at the pictures. The picture of the beautiful planet which is our home, with that little glimpse of sun coming over the eastern horizon. The picture of the earth setting over the horizon of the moon. The picture of a total eclipse of the sun as the space capsule gets directly behind the moon. 53 minutes of darkness with the glow of the sun around. Amazing. But equally amazing was listening to the astronauts try to explain their experience. How do you put words to that? Even in bringing to mind with you those pictures, how is it that we get our words around them? But how important that we try. There was in their sharing the stumbling for finding the right words, but there was also awe and wonder in the tone, in the descriptions, in the clarity of perspective that they were gaining from looking at our home from so far away. You could call it an epiphany. You know how it is we celebrate the Epiphany. This was a epiphany. To look at our world and say, oh my goodness, why are we creating false borders, human-made borders? Why are we accentuating false senses of division and differences among us when we are so small and sharing such a small and beautiful planet? It was a unified concern for the carrying of the gift of our shared home. And I got caught up in it. Did you get caught up in it? It was amazing. A few years ago, the New York Times published a really wonderful article about the health benefits of awe and wonder. Dr. Dashiell Kurtner wrote a book called Awe, the New Science of Everyday Wonder and How It Can Transform Your Life. And that proved to be kind of the basis of this article. He wrote that awe is the feeling of being in the presence of something vast. In other words, bigger than ourselves. That transcends our understanding of the world. That's what awe is, if we were to try to explain it. And he wrote that we as human beings have a propensity for embracing perceived vastness. Pascal would call it a void, a God-sized vacuum or a God-shaped vacuum, this need to connect with ultimate things. And so this author tells us, well, just because we have this vastness within us that searches for answers and meaning, we don't have to go out into space to get the answers. That moments of awe and wonder come in all shapes and sizes. You know that, and I know that, and clearly the kids know that. It can be a sunset or a sunrise. It can be the birth of a child. It can be your choir singing at Easter. Whoa. It can be a prayer that we share in this space, or Beth's words that ring true and open us to a larger understanding of what the Spirit is doing among us. It can be the rolling in of the tide, or how darn funny that platypus looks, or what kind of shark was that? Crazy. It can be all the spring colors that we've had the privilege to embrace over the past few weeks and will continue to appear in our gardens. It can be even in the kindnesses that we give witness to, a stranger, to a person in need. The acts of generosity at a food pantry. The standing up with a sign that's calling the world's attention to an injustice. All moments of awe and wonder, opportunities to mine greater truths and deeper questions. All places where we are just that much closer to the God who never leaves us or forsakes us. And this is great news too, because in addition, the article tells us that there are some very physiological benefits to awe and wonder. In fact, awe and wonder can pull forth from us the hormone oxytocin. We always want more of that. That's the hormone associated with love and trust and bonding. In addition, when we are having these moments, maybe you call them ooh-ah moments, our heart rate slows. That's cool. Relieves our digestion. I could use some more of that. It deepens our breathing. And there are psychological benefits. Sharon Salzberg, who is a leading mindfulness teacher and author, talks about these moments of awe and wonder and how they get us out of our own mind, that they quiet the inner critic. Do you have a voice in your head that sometimes tells you you are not enough, or you are broken, or you are this, or you are that, you are unlovable? These moments, they come at us in a rush, and we put aside those voices, and for a moment they are quiet. She believes it's the absence of self-preoccupation, helping us get out of our heads and realize our place in the larger context of the world, of God's love, of the universe that God created. My family, we like to go to Maine in the summer. We go and we camp. We camp way up north at Baxter State Park, right at the foothills of Mount Katahdin. We've been doing it every summer now for maybe 15 years or more. All our kids, even though they're adults, they come. It's really crazy awesome. And we stay in the same campsite at the same part of the park where there's a little pond, and at night there is no light pollution. So campers find themselves with their flashlights wandering to the shore of this pond. We turn off our flashlights and we wait for our eyes to acclimate to the darkness. And for the first time, I can understand how it is that God spoke to Abram and said he would make out of Abram and his wife a nation so great it would outnumber the stars in the sky or the sand on the shore. Because when I look at the Hopewell sky, I can count the stars. But when I look at the main sky, they're innumerable. And we can see the Milky Way galaxy. We can see that beautiful, cloudy sort of strip in the night sky. And we can see satellites, a little bit of humanity and their genius, floating across the way. And we often go in August, not lately, but it used to be the case. We were always there for the Perseid meteorite showers. And our heart rates lower, and our breathing deepens, and the meal we shared around the campfire settles. And we all know that we're a part of something much bigger than ourselves. And even though we feel the sense of smallness, there is that sense that we matter, and that we're all a part of what we see. And here's the cool thing about awe and wonder. You don't have to be rich or famous to access it. You don't have to be a citizen of the United States of America. You don't have to be a particular race or gender or sexuality in order to access it. You can be 5 or 105. And awe and wonder is available to you and to me. And there is, of course, a spiritual benefit, is there not, to awe and wonder as well. These moments create the space for the Spirit to speak. Sometimes that still small voice is really hard to hear. Sometimes it even comes in the sound of sheer silence, which is, by the way, what you hear in Maine, because they don't have the cicadas that we have. There is this really almost disturbing silence in the night, only to be broken up by a lone loon on the lake. But sometimes that's the very place where God speaks clearest. And so it is that these moments of awe and wonder can be what Celtic Christians called thin space. Celtic spirituality, even predating Christianity, had this idea of thin space where what was spiritual and what was earthly got so close in certain moments that the border was almost indivisible. Thin places of wonder and awe. You have those here in the midst of your worship. This is meant to be a thin place where you set aside your daily schedules and activities and to-do lists, and you settle yourself in to be present to God in worship, but also in the opening of heart, mind, and ear to hear the Spirit speaking. Jesus said, wherever 2 or 3 are gathered, I'm there in your midst. So when you do this, it's a thin place. You can find thin places in other places, in hospital rooms, in food pantries, kitchen tables, on a hike at the shore, even in your dreams, and even behind locked doors. It was the thinnest of places when Jesus appeared to the disciples. The first resurrection appearance. Behind locked doors, closed, windows down, and there Jesus is in the thinnest of places. Heaven and earth becoming one. I suppose there's some fear in that. I imagine for the 4 astronauts traveling and hurling through space, being flung at the moon in order to go around, awe and wonder and fear. But that's okay. Fear keeps us on our toes. It was this awe and wonder, this thin place that found Paul, who was then Saul, a persecutor of Christians on the road to Damascus, and blinded him for a period of time so that he might see the truth of who this Jesus of Nazareth was and is and forever will be. And so it is that when Paul writes his letter to the Romans, and Paul is rough around the edges. I was supposed to talk today about connection. And I don't know that Paul is always our best example of how it is that we share our ooh-ah moments. If you heard in the beginning of the reading, he pretty much called everyone who didn't get it wicked. So that's really not how people are going to hear you. You wicked one, because you don't see the world the way I see it. Let's sit down and have a talk. No, thank you. No, thank you. But for Paul, it worked for some. But the point of his letter is the idea that in creation, we can have these experiences. Even if we've never heard the truth of the gospel, we can know the truth of the Creator by what is made, because you know so much about a person or a deity by what they've created. We don't worship the creation itself, but we are in awe and in wonder of the God who put it in place. That's what Paul is trying to tell the Athenians. He's trying to say, listen, don't worship Apollo or Zeus or Artemis, but worship the God who gave you thunder, volcanoes, and the ocean, and the mountains, and each other, and dogs, cats if you're a cat person. That is the fertile soil that will open you up to conversation. And that is maybe the place of connection. Because what we do know is that Jesus commissioned the disciples to go and tell this remarkably crazy story that would sound nuts if not for the transformative effect it had on their lives. It's a tough sell. Jesus appeared to us, we saw him. What? But when you can meet people in a moment of awe and wonder, when you can sit side by side and say, in humility as opposed to arrogance, this is what I experienced when we worked together at that pantry. This is what it was like to be in Maine before the canopy of the heavens. This is what that rainbow, did you see that rainbow the other day? This is what that rainbow brought to mind for me. And somebody else says, oh, I saw it too. I love rainbows. And there's your invitation to conversation. Shared experiences of awe and wonder. That's what we look for, to have those deeper, more meaningful conversations. Sometimes the best guides are songwriters and poets. I follow an artist named Dar Williams. Anybody ever heard of her? She's awesome. And a great songwriter. She has a song called After All, and just a line from the song is kind of like a Sherpa kind of taking you to one of these places. She's singing about her personal struggle with a healthy self-esteem, coming out of depression. And as she's realizing her value, she writes or sings, "The sun rose with so many colors it nearly broke my heart. It worked me over like a work of art. And I was a part of all that." And then there's Mary Oliver. Who loves Mary Oliver? Mary Oliver's a poet, recently deceased, but a voracious writer of poetry in very simple but deeply profound poetry, reflecting on what can be seen all around her. She, I think it was, Provincetown, Massachusetts, or Provincetown, right? She spent much of her life there, just walking the shores and in the woodlands and looking and experiencing the very same things we experience in so much of our life. Accompanied by a good dog. She has a whole book about the beauty and the lessons learned from a good dog. And she's the one that helps us understand what it is we're to be about. She has a poem called Instructions for Living a Life. 3 simple instructions. If we do these things, we will reap the benefit of awe and wonder. And if we reap the benefit of awe and wonder, so might those around us. She writes, pay attention. Be astonished. Tell about it. Thanks be to God. Amen. It is, of course,